This is a video on how to make a replacement clip for the airbox on an Yamaha FS1E. Very often the clips are missing, broken off, and it's always nice to make a new clip for them that looks very much like the original one. Here's an original one, and here's a replacement one I made earlier. Very similar, the two are. One's painted and sprayed, very hard to tell the difference. The clip is made in a small hammer form like this. This one is made out of a piece of 6mm plate, 50mm wide, 50mm high. A 10mm hole was drilled, 5.7mm down, 15mm across. The 10mm hole was put in there, and then an angle put on of 30 degrees. All the corners were slightly radiused. At the top there's a small step of 0.7mm, which is 0.1mm less than the thickness of the steel I'm using here, which is 0.8. And then a nail was used to clamp it in the vise, and the clip is hammer formed into the shape. First stage is cut out your piece of mild steel, 0.8mm in this case. I'm using a steel rule here to mark it out, which is 13mm wide, just roughly cutting out a piece of steel, nearly 50mm long, in this case 13mm wide. Around that width will do. Ensure the piece of material is nice and flat. Piece of material ready to cut, 13mm wide and just under 50mm long. Next stage is to file a small slot into the middle of the material. This will give you a location on the hammer form. Just to locate it on the hammer form. A small cutout enables it to locate. I'll mark a line on here using the same ruler, 13mm wide. Put a mark on there with a Sharpie pen. You know, this is the area that you don't want to bend when you put it in the hammer form in the vise. Put the material in the vise. Like so. You don't need to hammer form it over. This is located in the same place at the end. Knock it over with a plastic hammer. Gradually at a time. Note the small transition area here. This is quite critical. You should end up with a piece like this at this stage. Again, put it back on the hammer form, holding this surface tight against the material. Put it back in the vise. Hammer form the other side over. Gradually at a time. Try and keep this the same as the other side. Remember the transition area again. You'll now end up with a U-shaped piece of material. Try and keep these transitions the same here. If you compare the two clips at this point, you'll notice the sides are totally different heights. The base is formed very similar shape. We need to cut some of this height off here to enable us to form it. I'm still leaving enough for the finished component. So we just trim this piece of metal off here. It'll aid in the forming process on the next stage. As you can see, we've still got a little bit of height left here. Next stage is to locate the part in the hammer form. Notice the notch on the top locating. It'll sit on the hammer form like so. And then you need to put in the vise. Clamp it in the vise. Like so. I'll use two hammers at this stage. One to push the end round, and the cross peen hammer to form it into the groove. Slowly working around. Slowly work the material into the groove. I have a piece of material. This is 8mm thick with a radiused end. I'll hammer this into the hammer form. Hammer it into the form. Right, backing up underneath to support it. Gently tap the material down onto the hammer form. Being very careful on the rear corner here. Tap it into shape. Turn it over and repeat the same process. Back it up with a hammer underneath. Tap it onto the hammer form. At this stage you should have something looking like this. Notice the relief on the corner. Be very careful at this point. I do like to dress them corners in with a ball peen hammer. Use a slight ball peen hammer. Dress that in on the corner, same as the other side. Dress the corner in. If you're not happy with it, you can work it in on top of the vise here a little bit. This is quite a tricky area, as you can see. You need to get that blend in the corner. Get it to blend in. This is what the clip will look like at the moment. Right, the next stage is to compare it to the original clip. Hold it by the side, make sure it looks like the right angle, and judge where you need to cut the end off. I'm going to put a slight mark on here, and then I'll cut it off with a disc cutter. Okay, the end's now cut off. We'll compare it to the original one. Got very similar shape. What we need to do now is sand the end off so we haven't got the notch on there anymore, so it's the same length, and we need to sand the edges off so it's the same width. If you get any lopsided irregularities like on here, sand it off so it's even. So I've now sanded the sides off and sanded the notch off the end. Got this component so it's the same width across the clip, and it's the same length up to the transition area. I've also put it back into the hammer form and readdressed some of these transitional areas where I wasn't quite happy with it. It's quite a ragged part at the moment. Right, the next stage is we need to put some curvature into the end of the clip where it sits onto the airbox. If not, it sits on and rocks about. So I've now got a rubber mallet mounted in the vise, and with my cross peen hammer I'm just going to put a little bit of shape into it, slowly forming. Don't worry if you put too much shape in, you can always just tap it out a little bit afterwards. As you can see, there's some slight curvature in the end of it, and that helps it sit on the airbox tighter. It now won't rock about, and when you spot weld it on, it'll give a nice clean finish. Next, to address all the issues, sand the edges off, sand a slight radius on the end. Just generally dress it up with a sander so it looks like the original part. Here's the component that we've finished compared to the original one. As you can see, very similar. And when you get it on there, some primer, finished in paint, you're very much hard to tell the difference. It's all been achieved by a small hammer form, so it still sits in the hammer form. As you can see, the drift was used to drift it into the hammer form, plus a selection of hammers. And there's the finished component. They're finished airbox clips. The whole procedure of actually producing the clip takes about half an hour. Obviously the video's been edited. Some of the processes and things have been repeated slightly to achieve the result, but once you've got the hammer form, it's going to take about half an hour to make each clip.